Hello, hello, hello. Can you all hear me okay? Good. Fantastic. I hope you are all having a beautiful weekend. It has been, for the most part, pretty sunny here, and I sat out in my backyard today, just soaking in the sunshine for maybe 2 hours because my whole body needed it. So I hope you're all having some level of that today. I'm gonna give everybody, I know that we're probably expecting a few more people live, a couple of minutes, but while we do that, let's check in with our feels today. So as per usual, check in with yourself and find one feeling word that encapsulates where you're at right now. Whatever it is, no judgment zone as always, and pop it in the chat once you have it. Okay. Alyssa says anxious. Mel says secure. Jen says accomplished. Annie says depleted. That's okay, Mel. You can totally shred your chicken for your soup. I am feeling grateful today. Yeah, that feels right to me. Yeah, we're going to go with grateful. Autumn says impatient. Autumn, are we wearing the same thing? Basically. Is it tie-dye? Love it. I feel like my uniform lately has just been tie-dye everything, and I'm very unapologetic about it because it feels very much in alignment. Hi, Jessica.
That's why I snarkily said that your next book was about tie-dye.
It was about tie-dye. I mean, it is about me being queer and poly, so kind of.
Kind of.
Yeah. Jess, we are just checking in with our feelings words where I already shared everybody else's. We popped them in the chat, but if you want to just quickly check in with yourself and let us know how you're feeling in the chat, that would be amazing. Before we start, let me just, for whatever reason, on my computer, not my iPad, which is over here, but my computer, it's not letting me pull up Facebook, so I just want to make sure if that if anyone said anything in the group that I see it before we get going, but I don't think anyone has. Cool. Okay. Pop. Okay, so today, Jessica said anxious. We have a few feels of anxiousness today. That's okay. Today we're talking about people pleasing, all things people pleasing, which every single person that's in this program identified on the first call as people pleaser. And I built this program for people pleasers. So you're in the right place. And this is something that we could pick apart in a million ways. And frankly, every single week we move away from the people pleasing trope that society and our past selves have gotten us into, our less authentic selves maybe have gotten us into, and we move closer and closer to our fuck yes selves, which is ultimately away from our people pleasing tendencies. But I wanted to have an entire week dedicated to this specifically, and for us to take this hour together, whether you're here live or watching the recording, to really unpack all of the different layers, to go back to last week's analogy of the onion, because we're going to be really living in that analogy today and this week, frankly, when thinking about our people-pleasing tendencies. Because the thing is that while all of you identified yourselves as a people pleaser, chances are that each and every single one of you operate within the world differently within the umbrella of people pleasing. It's like, trying to think of a different analogy. I can't think of anyone other than Polly right now because I talk about this all the time, but it's like ethical non-monogamy, there's like an umbrella of what that can look like. And underneath that, there can be all sorts of things like swinging, monogamish, open relationships, and polyamory. And it's just one of the many ways that it shows up within the bigger umbrella, right? And that's the same thing as people pleasing. And when I work with people around this, especially in a one-on-one capacity, it's really interesting because a lot of my clients and people who've done my group programs before will know this too. It's like, they're like, oh, that's what people pleasing is. I didn't realize that's like what it can look like. And actually, I never identified as a people pleaser, but it turns out I totally am, but I only ever thought of it from this fashion before. So today, I want to do things a little bit differently than how we've been operating. And this is going to be more of a sharing experience. So for everyone who's on live, we're going to be doing a little bit more talking than normal. And for those of you who are watching the recording, I encourage you to go live this week and share the things that everyone gets to share here today so that we can unpack a little bit more, because ultimately I think that you're going to learn the most from one another in this context than me talking to you about what people pleasing is. So just wrap your brains around that. I didn't want to just like spring that on you, but wrap your brains around that before we start. And also I encourage you, as always, to have something to write with nearby, just in case something that somebody says really resonates and you're like, oh, that's a me too. And something I want to start practicing and putting into place, especially for today, is when someone is talking, oh, Brittany just joined. When someone is talking, if somebody says something that you resonate with, either that you hear it and you're like, I totally have experienced something similar in my own life, or maybe the pattern they're expressing is something that you also notice in yourself, I just want you to write in the comments, me too. And I just want us to get in the habit of not only acknowledging that for ourselves, but also in the habit of acknowledging to a person who is speaking vulnerably and sharing and expressing something that they are not alone. And don't say it unless you identify, unless you resonate with that. Because like I said, today we're talking about people pleasing. And at the end of the day, that's going to look very different on all of us and also similar in a lot of ways too. Cool? Okay. So we are going to approach this in a very similar way that we talked about and thought about and unpacked last week around comparison. And we got to the circles, the layers. Remember the onion to our why to the root. So what we were talking about last week was building up and understanding and getting clarity and self-awareness, which is what we're working on this month, on the why, so that we could have our daily habits and our overall what reflected from our inside out instead of our external, affecting our inside. But that's not always so simple because we have ingrained patterns, especially as people pleasers. We have ingrained patterns and habits that are naturally external. And sometimes we know what those external things are and how they show up, or we have an idea of what that looks like, and we have no idea why, right? So today we're flipping it. Today we're going to deep dive, and part of this will include journaling and writing things out, and then we're going to share. We're going to deep dive going from outside in to get a deeper clarity on why it is that each and every single one of us that is inside this space, why we operate from a people-pleasing standpoint, right? Because it's going to be different for all of us. And we're going to start with the obvious, or maybe the more obvious part of that, which is the external of the circle, which is what? Okay? So I'm going to give you guys like 5 minutes to brainstorm and write down what are the scenarios, right? Or just the things in your life that you notice tend to bring about your people-pleasing tendencies, what you identify as you operating in people-pleasing mode. So this can be anything from literally a person like my mom, to when I'm at work and my boss asks me to work extra hours. That could be an example of that. Really anything that is under the what category, what brings about your people pleasing, okay? So just take the next 5 minutes. Again, if you like music during that time, I'm gonna mute myself and I'll come back in 5 and we can start the discussion. All right, start wrapping up your thoughts and brainstorms. We're going to share some of the things that came up. You can share 1, 2, or 2 things, whatever you want to. And we're going to do like a typical order that's on my Brady Bunch, just whoever comes up first on my screen. So just remember who you're after so that when we go through the different rounds, it'll be easier than me being like, okay, unmute yourself now. But I'm going to share first. You might notice, and we'll see what comes up, but you might notice that a lot of this comes from a place of fear. For example, 2 of mine are fear of what other people may think, fear of hurting people I love, right? I tend to do things that I don't actually are not in alignment with me at my core, my fuck yes self, because I'm worried that if I do something else, it's going to hurt the people that I love, right? That's an example of how I people please a lot in my life. It can also look like other people's expectations or the needs of the people that I love. Those are some of my personal examples. Okay. And so maybe somebody will say something that sparks and you're like, oh, that's something I definitely do too. Jot that down for yourself too, right? This is all about learning and sharing and learning from each other today. Okay. Annie, you are up on my Brady Bunch.
Okay. I also had some that started with my fear that, for example, if I displease someone, they will forget about me, move on from me. And that would be like in a work setting or also like a social setting, like a friendship or a work opportunity. Also my desire to be accepted and to be well thought of. So I do things for that reason. Also my mom and I have a relationship where it's a little bit codependent upon pleasing her, and that's kind of a manipulation of hers kind of in the family a little bit. So and then I also said, like, when I'm struggling inside, like internally with something and I'm not addressing that, I do things to like help other people. Like I fill that space with
you go into support mode.
Yeah, like instead of supporting myself, if it's like if I'm trying to deflect, that I'm like, oh, I know I could support a friend, or these people need my help. And I notice like that's a tendency where I fill up my schedule with helping other people, thinking that's like a good thing to do, which it is, but really it's a lot of times because I'm not okay with something in my own life.
Yeah. So you acknowledge that while it's a beautiful thing to want to support other people, it ends up being a coping mechanism to avoid your own stuff. Mm-hmm. Totally. Thank you for sharing. Okay. Autumn, you're next up on my Brady Bunch.
Yeah, I forgot to say me too in the chat, but I would say my relationship with my mom also is this tough spot of expectations and kind of shrouded in the sense of like she worries, she wants, all that, but one specific thing that I tend to use it with my relationship with her that I use for a lot of people, I kind of wrote it down as neutral territory. Like I just kind of keep our relationship and our conversation in a specific lane, because I know that if we were to address things outside of that lane, that I would have to like make that call, like make that decision. So I just don't even let it be a thing, and I just avoid it completely. So I just stay in neutral ground where we're on the same page.
It's a beautiful thing about setting boundaries, to make it
easier,
which we will be diving into in a big, big way in the future in the coming weeks. But that's a big part of things for sure. So love that.
Yeah.
Is that everything you wanted to share?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for sharing. Alyssa.
I really feel the same about my relationship with my mom. I used to try to fix her because she has mental health issues, and I realized through my own journey of figuring out myself, it doesn't work that way. So that's definitely there still. And then also my job as a nurse. It's really hard to not people please in that department. You're kind of there to help people at their worst times. So yeah, it's very interesting.
Totally. Thanks for sharing. Jen, you're next up. Here, I can ask to unmute you. Did you see something pop up? Okay, good.
Okay, thanks. I don't know where it's at.
I got you.
So I was thinking, yeah, it's kind of like about their perception of me. My need to control that, so they, like I have a thing, like I don't want somebody thinking I'm mean or a bitch, you know, or even coming off like disappointment to people, or somebody getting mad and deciding that that's the thing that's gonna get them to leave. So good old abandonment, you know, those things.
Thanks for sharing. Okay, Mel, you're up next on mine.
Hi.
Hi.
Mine were kind of similar to everyone else. So it was a lot of like feelings for me rather than fear, but I wrote this feeling. So feeling like it's easier to just agree than to argue or bring up other points. Not wanting to disappoint others. Feeling like I don't have a strong enough opinion to want to like push back, or also like I don't have enough like evidence or like proof of my thoughts or whatever. And I also wrote people in authority, like my managers. I will most of the time do what they say. Sometimes I'll like procrastinate and whatever, but I'll do it.
Yep. Thanks for sharing. Okay, Jessica, you're up next.
Mine was very similar. Two big ones were fear of how others see me. But my other one was I grew up in a very, very passive aggressive family. So I didn't learn how to properly confront people when I had issues. And so I default to wanting to please like people, because if I confronted the issue, I might make them mad and they might leave me. But I'm like finally getting to a place where I can have healthy conversations and say, hey, this is what's bothering me. And hey, guess what? They don't leave. Like sometimes they can be good. But that's still a fear that I have. Like not every relationship I have is like that.
Yeah.
And so that's still a very big fear for me.
Thanks for sharing. Okay, Brittany.
Hey guys, so one thing I wrote down was actually really similar to what she just said. I grew up in more an abusive household, so for me it was more to try to keep the peace, to where if I just would comply or something deflect off of me, it would be better. But also another one that I'm coming to more terms with is when someone goes to someone else for a need that I could do or help them with, I would try to people please and be like, well, I can do that for you because that goes back to like a fear of abandonment. Like I'm constantly like, well, why would you go to them? I can help you. I can do it for you.
Thanks for sharing. First of all, I just want to say it's like bringing me to tears seeing all the Me Too's. I don't know if anyone else is feeling like very overwhelmed by that in a great way. I'm also just like, oh, you guys know this, I'll cry out probably at every call. Just it's a lot. And I hope that's empowering for you all to receive as this is going on. And I just want to echo that there are so many through lines. The biggest through line I'm witnessing is fear, and the fear that is rooted in worrying about being loved, accepted, and seen. And that's what this all comes back to at the end of the day. Like everything that we do in life, I believe, is because we just want to be loved and accepted and seen as our truest self. I mean, that's why you are here, is to figure out who the fuck you are at your core and understand how to help other people in your life see you in a deeper way, love you for all of you, because you're actually showing that, and accept every part of you. And if you don't accept and love and see yourself, how can you expect others to do the same, right? And I think that's the biggest. I hope today, I want that to be your biggest takeaway. You can have a million other ones, but I want that to be your biggest takeaway, because that's the work we're doing together over these 12 weeks, is how can I really fully see and accept and love myself? Because people pleasing at its root happens not because necessarily of others. Yes, that is present, and we have all of these things that impact us. But at the end of the day, it's just because we want to be loved and seen and accepted by that person. But a lot of the time, we're not even allowing that person to love us and see us and be accepted. Right? And fully accept us, because we're not showing up as our true selves. We're not showing up as our fuck yes selves. So how can they do that? How can they know how to interact with us if we don't know how to communicate with them? How can they know how to support us and love us if we don't know how to set and uphold boundaries? Future weeks, right? But that's, and frankly, how can they be here for us and fully help us stand in our truth if we don't even know what we need, why we are the way we are, why we have the patterns we have, right? At the end of the day, the ultimate like conflict and friction that happens within our relationships is because we don't know how to fully like stand in ourselves, unless we're in an abusive situation, right? But we don't know how to fully be present and help the person who's wanting to love us, right? So that's why this clarity and understanding what happens, what are the circumstances that bring it up, that's the first step. Okay, so that was the what. The next part is how, right? That's the second circle of our onion, right? So we just figured out these are the things that elicit my people pleasing tendencies to come up. But how does that then show up within me, right? So how do I feel? So we can talk about and think about feelings in this. We can also think about like physically, like what do I do? Like, how do I respond to the people? How do I do, like, this could be like I say yes to everything that this person, that could be an example, right? Of how this shows up. Okay. So I want you to brainstorm for the next 5 minutes. Again, I'll put myself on mute again, put music on, whatever you need. How do people pleasing stuff show up for you in your body and in the world? Okay. Okay, I'm going to give you guys one more minute. Feel free to obviously continue to add. Okay, so we're gonna go in the same order, and I'll start again. So if you have stuff to wrap up, feel free to finish this while I chat. This is gonna look different for all of us, and I think we probably might see some overlapping things. But some of the things I wrote down, and again, share 1 to 2 or however much feels aligned for you, is like I overbook my schedule and I don't put self-care on the back burner. A big one for me has been like I hide and like retreat and hide a lot of really big parts of who I am from myself and from the world, like my queerness and poly and stuff like that. Also a big thing for me is that like I don't address my needs, and instead I go on like overdrive when it comes to supporting the people that I love with their needs and showing and showering them with love. So those are just examples of, you know, how that kind of manifests for me. So let's go in the same order.
Yeah, I said a lot of some similar things, like saying yes without thinking it through if it's something that I can or want to do. And yeah, it looks like kind of taking on more things than I really want to take on. And then it leaves me feeling depleted instead of energized. And then I often have like feelings of regret or resent towards myself for not addressing my needs, and not, you know, taking care of myself. I think that's it.
Cool. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I feel like lately the biggest, as I've kind of been diving into this time of kind of transformation lately, something that keeps sticking out to me as a frame of reference is just I feel like I'm kind of living in like a watered down version of my life, depending on who I'm interacting with. You know, I have like, it's like could be coming out as like code switching or just yeah, just kind of feeling like you're living through filters a little bit. And so it like makes me feel like when I'm just by myself, like, oh, this is my true self. But what is your true self? What does that really mean if that's not your true self to anyone else but yourself? Like that means something, like, you know, like your perception of yourself is the most important, but like it impacts everything else in your life. So like how can that really be your true self if that's not you in any other relationship or aspect of your life? Kind of same with the resentful, although sometimes I have a hard time not resenting others for like the way our relationship is. Like I have a hard time not resenting my mom a little bit, just because I feel like there are things that were instilled from when I was so young, and like I carry a lot of our relationship now because I'm an adult, but our relationship is the way we were, and I was a child at that point.
Yeah.
So to kind of put that same weight on myself is tough. And I regret not being able to live my fullest life while my dad was still alive. So there's some regret there.
Yeah.
Because it would have been hard to have those conversations and to push through all of that. But I don't get to have that now.
Yeah.
So it's tough.
Thanks for sharing. Okay, before we move on, I just want, since Heather just joined, we're kind of halfway through where we're at. So feel free to jump in if you can, but we're kind of doing a reverse of the onion layer that we talked about last week in terms of our people-pleasing tendencies. So we started talking about like what brings about our people-pleasing tendencies in our life. So if you want to like brainstorm whatever feels right for you. And then right now we're going through and talking about how that shows up for us, like how we might feel, how that manifests for ourselves. So if you want to just be a fly on the wall and listen, that's totally fine. If you want to contribute your own stuff too, that's totally fine too. Cool. Okay, amazing. Let's continue.
Yeah, anxiety is the first thing that came to mind. This is where a lot of my anxiety comes from. And until recently, until I really worked on it recently, it was like all the time. I never got a break from it. So yeah, and then also my shyness. Some people don't see this side of me, so they don't understand it, but I hide myself from a lot of people, and I don't want to tell everyone everything about me. So I'm very quiet, and I don't let myself be seen. And one other thing I wrote was I give in to what other people want because I don't want that conflict. That's like huge. I hate conflict, so I try to stay away from it.
I just want to reflect something. You are allowing yourself to be seen here, and that's a really beautiful thing. And I just want to honor you for that, because while obviously this is like our own little safe pod, but you know, while we may not feel able to be seen by our most like dearest humans, like you're doing that here, and that's practice for how to do that, you know, in the real world. And I just want to honor you for that, because that's a huge thing.
Thank you.
Jen, do I need to? Oh, you figured it out. Amazing.
So I think some of the biggest things is like my people pleasing makes me like come up with rules for like my life. So like with my parents, like I can't do this because my sibling did that, and that was like bad. And so to make them not go through that again and be proud of me, then this is now the role and the path I have to take. Or like if somebody offers you something, you have to say no the first time. And then if they ask you again, then you can be like, yeah, I'll take it, sure. Or do you want the last cupcake? You know, you have to offer it to somebody else before you take it. And so that just leads to like a really disingenuine self for me, which is awful for me, because I like to feel like I'm a genuine person, and I'm just kind of going through the motions here. Everybody knows I want that last cupcake. All right, don't take it. You know I want it, but I got to ask you first. And that's messed up. And then like, you know, depleted was a word I wrote down. Like it just wears me out. So
yeah. Thanks for sharing.
I was reflecting a lot about like the not wanting to disappoint others piece. And so I feel like sometimes I like act like I'm super go with the flow, but it's because I like don't want to actually show them how I feel or whatever. I'm like, oh yeah, whatever we want is fine with me, but really I'm like, I just don't want to tell you what I want. But then I was thinking about like how that makes me feel. It makes me feel like annoyed and angry at myself, and it makes me like question my beliefs and who I am and what I actually want. And then I get more annoyed, and I'm like, why didn't I speak up or say what I felt or whatever? Yeah, and then it always comes back to, for me, also just feeling like people will see the real me, like, and then leave. Like that is just always like an encompassing fear throughout everything. It's just they're gonna see the real me and then not like it.
For sure. Thanks for sharing.
I think for me, I just spend a lot of time stressing about what people will think. And also, if I know that they'll react badly, I just want to avoid that confrontation, which just leads to me just not wanting to confront people and all of that. Anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah. Just leads to a lot of stress.
Thanks for sharing.
For me, I know through my time with my therapist, I'm an Enneagram 9, so I'm a big people pleaser. That's really like at my core, that's what I love. But at the same time, I know that that's harming me because I don't assert myself enough. And one of the things that like I kind of do to do that in others is I learn people's love languages and I speak it back to them in hopes that they'll acknowledge that I've done something for them that means so much to them, or like I see them, and that they would in turn reflect it on me.
Yeah.
And that's something that I try to do to me, like saying it out loud makes me go like, wow, that sounds really manipulative. But at the same time, it's part of that wanting to be accepted and wanting to be seen with them.
It all comes back to the same thing. Every one of you, it's like, yep, here we are again. The pattern is so clear. Okay, Heather, would you like to share, or you want to just chill?
Yeah. Sorry I'm so late, guys. I'm like in the middle of moving and it's been crazy. But some of the things that I feel fuel my people pleasing tendencies, like the anxiety about just what will happen if I don't. And I think fear of conflict with the people that I love. And this kind of manifests as letting people walk all over me, not saying when I'm uncomfortable, which kind of has created this really confusing perception of like who I am, because I do all these things that I don't want to do, but I'm like, oh, but I chose them, so I do, right? I'm like kind of trying to figure out now who I actually am. I'm like, okay, well, what the fuck do I want? But yeah, so I'm working on that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Woo, so many Me Too's. Yeah, it's very interesting, right? And this always makes me, again, reflect on our first week where we talked about how fear actually shows up when we feel we're in danger. We like fight or flight or freeze, right? And a lot of us talked about we retreat, we hide, we don't speak our needs. We feel a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, we go inward, or, maybe we fight back, or we run away from things. We put ourselves on on the back burner, all sorts of stuff. Or, we fight back with love. We give extra love. We want to show love just so we can try and hopefully feel loved too, right? It's very interesting that that's how we show up. And I think the through line of, wanting to be seen and loved and accepted is super, super valid. And I think when we get to the why, which we're about to dive into now for the next 5 minutes, is probably a big part of that is I just want to be seen and loved and accepted, but I want to encourage you to dive a little bit deeper. Okay. Think of this as like the third layer of the iceberg, right? If the what is what other people see, right? And it's on top of the surface, how you feel is like the first layer that's under the surface, and you're experiencing that, but people probably don't see that part. But there's a deeper layer, right? It's not just about anxiety. Why is this fueling you, right? Where is this all actually coming from at the end of the day? So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to think on this. It is not going to necessarily come to you in the next 5 minutes if you haven't like really thought about this a lot. Think of some thoughts of examples. This can even go back to like patterns with your parents that you witnessed, or deep rooted fears that we talked about at the beginning, right? In the what, but why is that manifesting, and where is that really coming from? This is where the magic really starts to happen, when we get to the why. So I'll give you guys 5 minutes and then we'll go from there. obviously this is something that we could go into for a long time, but I want to make sure that we get around to everybody before our call is over tonight. Before we dive into this part, I'm curious, as we entered this call and also throughout this call, if you were to, again, I don't love doing this generally speaking, but I think it proves a point. If you were to categorize being a people pleaser as a positive or a negative thing, what would you say? Let us know in the chat. Negative. Yeah, everybody's saying negative. So I understand that feeling. And I'm going to now share with you why I people please. And I want you to tell me if you think this is a positive or a negative thing. I love people a lot. I'm going to cry talking about this because this is my why, right? I love so deeply. Like when someone is in my life, even when they harm me, even when they operate in a way that I don't understand, that hurts me in a really massive way, I do not know how to let people that I love go. And I love unconditionally. I give so much. I give 100,010% to all the people in my life. That is why I don't address or speak my needs. I put my self-care on the back burner. I overbook my schedule. I go above and beyond for the people I love. And I sometimes hide parts of myself because I love so deeply. Now, when you hear that on its own, do you see that as a positive or a negative? And yet, that is the root of why I people please. I say this and I share this because I think we have this really, really interesting perspective about why we do these things. And it's because a lot of these what's, right, the surface part can be harmful to us, right? They lead us to getting hurt sometimes, or we don't have clear boundaries. And so we get frustrated, or we can feel stressed and anxious and overwhelmed and all these feelings. But a lot of the time, and not always, but a lot of the time, the root of it is coming from a really beautiful place. We just don't know how to symbiotically merge tools in order to show up for ourselves in the process. So when you are working through for the next, 2 more months, 2 months plus a week that we are together, and you are really thinking about, okay, well, I'm a people pleaser. Don't think of it necessarily as this negative thing. Think of it as this really beautiful light that just shows how much you love people, but that you want to adjust the way you show up in life so that you can serve yourself in a deeper way too. Because the love that you give to others, you deserve to give to yourself back. Okay? So yeah, I just wanted to share that because I think we don't think about that all the time. So I want to go through again. Again, if you don't have something, that's totally fine. I want you to think about this as you're moving through this week. Getting to the root of why we do things can be really challenging. And maybe what I said sparked with you. Maybe you're like, yeah, that's a me thing. Okay. So yeah, let's just go in the same order. Share whatever came up for you. No wrong answers here.
Yeah, I think that is pretty much the same for me. Just like my deep, deep love for people. So I think I was kind of going in a different direction with the whys that are maybe more like the what's and the hows that I wrote down, but that really resonated with me that, yeah, that's really the why, is just a deep love.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for sharing.
I think a lot of mine is rooted in my religious upbringing. There's a lot of people pleasing in religion. I mean, kind of a general like school of thought. It's like, you're not looking inward for truth, you're looking outward for truth.
Yeah.
Constantly. and your truth might be evil, inherently evil, because humans are inherently evil. And so I have these thoughts, like my sister left the church when I was in college, and she's like 8 years older. So she is about where I'm at now. And that was a really big ordeal in my family. And my family didn't do a great job at loving her through that. And I saw that. So I think that really affected how I decided to live my life. And so I decided to just hide when I didn't live the way that my family wanted me to live, because I didn't want to go through that.
Yeah. And this is the journey of unpacking all of the things that you were taught in that space. Mm-hmm. For sure. Thanks for sharing.
I put down, I do it because I don't have to be vulnerable. It's just easy to people please. I don't have to really get below the surface of just doing what the person wants, and giving them what they want. Yeah, it's a way to like protect myself and to stay hidden and just survive.
I think the last part of that is the key. And I don't want you to necessarily do this on the call right now, but I want you to go a layer deeper. Okay. Thank you.
So initially I went fear-based, and that, I people please because I fear that I'm unlovable and alone. And then when you went, I was like, well, what's the flip side of that? And I was like, it's that I want security and loving relationships. I just want to feel safe with people.
That's beautiful, and a huge, huge why. Thank you for sharing that.
So the earliest thing I could think of for me was I'm the youngest, and so when I was little, I always wanted to like fit in with my older siblings and like do whatever they did. And so that was kind of the earliest example. It was just like wanting to fit in with what other people were doing. But then another thing that I've been thinking about a lot this year is that I think my like previous breakups impacted me so much. This was in high school and college. Both guys, like, it was kind of right after the other. They both dumped me without really giving me good reasons. And so then that led me to be like, oh, it's my fault and like something's wrong with me. And like, yeah, which is where my like fear of showing people the real me comes from and all that. But I don't know. I've been trying to figure out like, did this fear happen before that and that was just part of it, or was that the initial? I don't know still. But
I mean, it sounds like it's all coming from a place, even in a different way from a romantic standpoint, but it's all coming from a place of wanting to fit in, like wanting to be that. Yeah, I think that's huge. I totally resonate with that. Thanks for sharing.
I think part of mine comes from coming from a religious family and just hiding part of who I am from them and wanting to please them and just not wanting to get into an argument about it. And so I just hide a big part of my life from them to avoid that. But also in other relationships, just not wanting to get into conflicts because I don't want to lose the person.
Cool. Thank you for sharing.
For me, I feel like I don't feel worthy of love. So it's me always driving to find my worth out of that and below it. So I people please in order to get that from them, because I feel below the worthiness.
So in this like search for worthiness is like the thing that drives everything.
Yeah.
It's huge. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, so for me, the first thing that I thought of is like, oh, I just don't want to hurt the people that I love. You know, I feel like, kind of like you were saying, Amanda, like I love so deeply, I believe in these people. It's like I see them and I believe I know what they're capable of. So I'm like, okay, they're gonna realize what they're capable of. They're gonna sort of rise to meet my expectations. So I let myself be treated not great because of that. And then I was like, I kind of went a little bit deeper, and this is going to be therapy for a second. But when I was younger, if I sort of did not agree with my father, or like didn't do exactly what he wanted, he would ignore me for up to a week, and he wouldn't talk to me. He wouldn't do anything with me. And so I was thinking about that, and I was like, oh my God, that sort of trained me that if I said what I wanted, if I stood up for myself in any capacity, people would not want to be around me.
Yeah, you'd be punished for it.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to say that that's probably the root of that, and it's sort of just built.
Yeah, that's huge. Thank you for sharing. I know that we're going to go a couple minutes over. If you have to leave, feel free to, but I just want to honor all of you on live right now for sharing. This was really vulnerable, and we got to a lot of like deep shit that's hard to talk about and hard to own. So I just want to honor that for you, and for all of you watching the recording. I really encourage you to share, because I think there's something about being able to voice this and be seen in this that allows us to build that deeper awareness of ourselves and also of others, and build that bond. So would love to see your shares in the group. This week's soul work is going to be hard, and I just want to say that up front. And I really encourage you to do this, and not just say you're going to do it, not just do it on a skimmed level. And I also encourage you, if you feel inclined, to share some of the things that come up for you on a day-to-day basis. You can even do a daily like dump in our group. I want you to take this week, and just for the week, every single day, have either like a journal or in your notes app, a people-pleasing journal. And you are going to, on a day-to-day basis, write down the ways in which you operated in a people-pleasing way and why. This is simply to build a deeper self-awareness, because yes, are all the reasons you listed today probably going to come up? I want you to see where they tend to focus more. I want you to witness your pattern on a weekly basis. It's going to be hard to witness yourself in this space, because this is, again, something that we don't love about ourselves necessarily, but I want to go back to the fact that we all said we thought it was negative, but we're starting to kind of shift our perspective around that, because the why isn't inherently so. Okay. And we're going to be tackling the hows and the whats in a more healthy and fuck yes aligned way coming up. But if we don't know where our patterns are, we don't know how to support ourselves. So this week it's about pattern thinking and curiosity. And I really encourage you to come at the experience from a judgment less, I'm not going to say free, but a judgment less standpoint. Okay. I want you to have compassion for yourself as you witness yourself making these moments where you are people pleasing, because you will show up in that way. Okay. And if you're struggling with that, or you're like, I did this and I feel shitty about it, come into our group and let us know that you're feeling shitty, and we will support you. I know this is probably a scary thing, but we're gonna do it together. I will do it with you. So it's gonna be great. Okay. And this is our last week with fear. I mean, we're gonna be talking about fear forever, because it's always at the root of things, but like, we're gonna be moving into the feels after this week. So it's gonna be a little more movement stuff. Okay. Before we hop off, let's all unmute, take a deep collective breath, and go about the rest of our Sundays. Okay. On the count of 3, we'll breathe in on 4, hold for 4, big lion's breath, release on 8, and then we'll say goodnight. Okay. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Hold for 4, release and go. Beautiful. Thank you for all being here. Have a beautiful rest of your Sunday. Thank you for all being so flexible on this week's date. I will let you know how I'm feeling tomorrow, and I'll see you inside the group. Bye.
Bye, guys.